Am I on? Can you hear me, guys? Okay, I can see myself now. That's something. Um, I can see the chat window. Ask, can you hear me? Audible? Yes, thank you, Todd. I don't know who else is there yet because my screens are still coming up and whatnot. I the technical difficulties I've been having are I was trying to print out some things to read during tonight's celebratory chat, and yeah, because it'd be easier for me to print them instead of staring at the screen or whatever. So I've got two screens because I could not get the printer to work. It printed 2 pages of what I wanted, and then it just said printer stopped responding. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. How are you guys doing? Hopefully you're all doing better with your technical aspects than I am right now. But yeah, I know. Um, in fact, I'm supposed to have a monitor up here where it will show me what's going on in this, and it's not showing me. Why? It's taking me back to some other thing. Come on. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to the 9th anniversary chat of Daron's Guitar Chronicles, which I cannot believe we are in now starting year 10, basically, right? So just coincidentally, Corwin and I had our 27th anniversary last night. Those of you who follow me on Instagram saw all of the food that we ate because that's what we do at the age that we are when we go out to celebrate is we eat like crazy. Hmm. I know, who'd have thought? The well, it's like we were never really big drinkers, and all of our sexual escapades and whatnot. Well, they're not as Instagrammable as they used to be. Maybe I don't know if that was the days before Instagram. Maybe I'm lucky in that way. But anyway, so I guess let me know. Um, okay, now I've got my monitor working. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so what's interesting is that it's showing me a mirror image of it does the thing of instead of showing me what you see, it reverses it so that I see a mirror image of myself because people are not used to seeing it moving in the opposite direction. It's a strange world. But yeah, welcome. So this is the for those of you who want to know the technical details, and I know people who like Darren's Guitar Chronicles love technical details. YouTube Live has a new way of going live now where instead of running special encoding software and this and that and whatever, if you're running Chrome, there's a way that you can just say camera and there's a like go live this second button. It doesn't work with other browsers though, and it doesn't work on mobile, and I don't know. It's we're entering a whole new generation sort of video live stream capabilities, I think, for like remember when the web first started and websites were sort of, like we call it web 1.0, and then CSS came and everything got revamped and, snazzed up and faster and more bloated in some ways and, whatnot. It's happening now with live stream where, remember we used to have ustream.com and, this, that, and whatever. And it's like now Facebook and Kickstarter, and every site has its own like live stream video by hitting this button now thing, and some of them obviously work better than others. YouTube seems to be getting it right so far. I'm drinking tea, of course, because this is me we're talking about. So the agenda for tonight. I guess I picked out a couple of things to read. Chris asked for chapter 955. And then I also picked out a sex scene that was a bonus scene so not everyone will have heard it or read it previously because I thought, what the heck? Right now, there's still they've never shut me off on YouTube for reading sex. So let's hope let's hope that stays that way. All right, now for some reason the chat window is like a little bit cut off. Like I can see most of the chat, but let me see. Do I have to make the window bigger? What happens? Oh, okay. If I make it bigger, look. If I just make the browser window bigger, it lets me see more stuff. Who'd have thought? You'd think it would just resize. Never mind. Um, anyway, so I have some things to read. I've got some questions to answer. If you guys want to ask me questions, feel free to post them in the chat window right there along the side. If you're not seeing the chat window, uh, you might need to be signed into YouTube to use the chat. I'm not sure actually. This is my first time using this particular YouTube live. Um, that ding you heard was someone texting me. Um, and all my iDevices ding now when somebody texts me. If you would like to text me a question because you don't want it to appear in the chat window, I will now. I'm trying to turn the dinging off so you guys won't be hearing it. My just give you my phone number. It's 617-290-9043. You can text me directly. So if you want to ask something you don't want your name attached to in on the internet, which I can totally understand. On the other hand, if you text me, then I will have your phone number. So it's totally up to you. What's your comfort level with your privacy? Obviously, I'm comfortable putting myself out there. Um, the Let's make sure yes. Yeah, in fact, a text just came in. Anyway, hello and welcome. And I know some of you are watching this later, so I want to get right to some stuff. I wanted to ask you guys if you've been enjoying the art. I thought that would be a fun way to celebrate. It's something a little different from usual. And hi, Chris. I see you just joined in the chat room. Okay, thanks. Thanks for the congratulations on both anniversaries. I didn't. I mean, you all know that I didn't expect, first of all, to be running Daron's Guitar Chronicles for 9 or 10 years. I also didn't expect back when I first started writing it in the 80s that in sometime in the 21st century I would still be writing it. But here it is. So, and it's been fantastic. It's been absolutely fantastic. The you know, of all the things that I cooked up in my brain that were simmering when I was a teenager, for this one to be the one that has had legs, it's just great. That's all I can say, really. Yeah. So, but I hope you've been enjoying the art. Let me know if you have any favorites. If there are any artists you think I should go back to, if we want, some specific thing illustrated, whatnot like that, because they were all great to work with. Either all people I met through DeviantArt, got referred to or chatted with, or met in uh, like chat rooms, or what do you call it, groups on DeviantArt and whatnot. So yeah, it was super fun, and I started that process, like months and months ago, maybe like a year ago. I was like, hey, an anniversary is going to be coming up. If I start now, maybe I'll have some stuff by then. And it turned out they were all also really fast and just super fun. They got real enthusiastic about the characters and wanted to read different parts and whatnot. And I just love seeing all the interpretations that people came up with of what the characters look like, what their attitudes are like, whatnot, and the different art styles. So that's been fun. And I'm doing that in the short term right now. I'm running another Kickstarter right now, for those of you who don't know, called Silk Threads, which is a Japanese erotic fantasy romance novel collection that I wrote with Laura Antonio and Midori, and we each wrote a novella, basically, so like a long short story, or like a short novel, 3 short novels, 3 short romantic novels, basically, together in one book. And we're doing, the Kickstarter is live right now. It's got 5 days left, and we set these goals where we're like, well, if we reach 20,000, then we'll put interior art in. If we reach 23,000, we'll put 3 more pieces of art. And if we pass 25,000, we'll put 9 pieces of art in. So 3 for each of the 3 stories. And we passed 25,000 last night. So it's like, okay, so we're talking with artists and, whatnot. And it's been kind of fun. So one guy I found through DeviantArt, it's just been a delight. And it's just, I love gushing about artists because visual art is not really one of my big talents. I mean, I have good graphic sense, but I don't have this sort of hand-eye coordination that is good for drawing, and whatnot. I've got a very literal, literal brain, and whatever. I'm not that kind of natural visual artist. My hand-eye coordination is all about music, and typing, um, whatnot. So yeah, but so please leave comments. Let me know if you like the art, if there was more art that you wanted to see. Um, I see in the monitor that we just had a little YouTube glitch. That was very psychedelic looking. Please, if you are have trouble with flashing lights, that be careful. Be careful watching this video, I guess. That just showed me like pixelated lights coming right at my face. It's snow crash. Yeah. We are living in a cyberpunk dystopia right now. All right, so I've got some questions that people had sent me in advance. They wanted me to answer, and like I said, put them in the thing there. Um, and there are still two more pieces of art to come. Two more pieces, one more piece. There was one that posted this morning, and then another one will be tomorrow. That will be the last one. So yeah, they're fun. But so one of the questions I got in advance was, what did I think of the Queen movie? And I have to confess, I have not seen the Queen movie yet. But of course, it being the internet, I have seen, like 3 different YouTube videos criticizing the Queen movie and, so forth, and people arguing about it. People have been arguing about it for basically since it was announced that they were going to be making this movie. And I understand people being frustrated um, uh, you know, about a lot of things, but a lot of the criticism I see are that people basically wanted it to be more about Freddie's struggle with being gay and AIDS and so forth. And it's like, um, I can see that. I don't want it to be whitewashed out. I don't want it to be um, downplayed, really. But that's also not the totality of Freddie's life. And I feel like and first of all, it was not just the story of Freddie; it's the story of the band. So you got to, you know, um, I basically I'll give Brian May and Roger Taylor a pass when they say they wanted to concentrate on musical aspects of it, and it's in there. And then of course they played fast and loose with some of their timelines in order to make a more dramatic 3-act movie. But that's Hollywood. I mean, so I felt the Hollywoodization of it was within acceptable limits of a biography. It's not a documentary. It's a movie that Hollywoodizes some stuff. So like there's a scene where it's like, this manager comes to them and is like, if you sign with me, you'll tour Japan, you'll do this, you'll do that. And actually that manager came on into their lives after they had toured Japan. But, it's like, but functionally it's like, yes, he was an important part of taking them to the next level of fame. So, okay, fine. Some things like that. So I've not seen it yet, but I want to. And I don't know when I'm going to get time, but maybe this weekend actually, potentially, depending on how much writing I get done. That's that's always the caveat, right? It's like any time that I could spend consuming media, I could be creating media. So it's sort of a trade-off. That's that same time slot, right? And I just got a comment here, Chris. I enjoyed the post with the ring, both the art and the story. Yeah. Yeah, that artist in particular, I can't remember now what the conversation was we had, but I was just like, oh, I've got to have one, as she had picked, she wanted to do a portrait of Ziggy. For some reason, they always want to do a portrait of Ziggy. It was the more visually interesting character, that's for sure. And I said, oh, you have to show his wedding ring, basically. And because we had just passed the point in the story where they get gay married. And, I mean, I shouldn't even call it married because technically we didn't have gay marriage yet then. And, Daron and Ziggy don't start calling it marriage until later, really. And, at the time, marriage really just connotated heterosexual, and it was one connotation, obviously, they didn't want to carry. But yeah, so hopefully I'll see the Queen movie soon. There's a couple of other movies coming up though that I need to see too. So it's like, when am I going to do all these things? I wish instead of sleeping, that's when I could read and watch movies. But sadly, my brain wants to actually completely shut off and my eyes want to close and all that. So, that's how it is. I need minimum 6 hours to be functional, and 8 hours is better, or it's hard to create. So, what was I going to ask you guys? I was going to ask you guys something. I have notes. What did I say? I guess I want what did you guys think of the Queen movie, I guess? Um, all right, one of the other questions that I got, was, do you have recommendations of books that are like Darren's Guitar Chronicles? Um, and and then I always have to ask people back the question, do you mean, are you looking for like a kind of immersive rock and roll story? Are you looking for a really long story? Are you looking for, like a first person, some of the, first person, lots of internal processing kind of story? 'Cause all these things are things that kind of make Darren's Guitar Chronicles what it is. When it comes to books that are, sort of, I don't know, that have the sort of rock and roll stuff, I find that I don't find a lot of books that have as much sort of background technical stuff going on. And it's uh, unless they're biographies. So I read a lot of rock and roll biographies actually when I kind of want to. That's my pleasure reading. So um, with like John Taylor and whatever. So I just saw Thomas Dolby on tour in the summer. Thomas Dolby is now teaching music at Johns Hopkins University, and which is interesting because he doesn't have a degree in music himself. He just has a degree in life, and he's teaching like technical musical innovation or something like that. So he did a tour where it was a lecture tour where he would pick 6 of his songs. And then show how they were made. So the technical aspects, and then tell stories also about, just the recording sessions or how they made the video or this, that, and the other, and, whatnot. Great, great concert. And then he would play the song and, show the videos and whatever. So he did Budapest by Blimp and uh, uh, Bayou Rain and whatnot. So it was a really really fun thing. And then of course he was actually on a book tour, and so they would sell the book. So I bought his book, and it's called The Speed of Sound, and it's super fascinating. Basically, the first half of the book is all his sort of autobiography of how he ended up at the top of the pop charts, and then fell off immediately upon discovering sort of the graft and corruption that runs the music industry, and how it was like, the things that affected his career that were completely outside of his control. Like, his record company deciding not to participate in a big payola thing and whatnot. And it was just, it's the same exact time window, of course, as is going on with Moondog 3. And he ends up moving to California and getting married. And, and the second half of the book is basically all him basically trying to start up these various music technology startup companies in Silicon Valley. And, the sort of first big boom in Silicon Valley, and, the kind of vagaries of that industry, and, like venture capital and investments and, this, that, and then in the economy and, all, just super, super fascinating book. So I really like that one. And then there are a couple of other memoirs of people around that same age out there that I want to read, that I haven't gotten to yet. The Beastie Boys just wrote a book, or the 2 surviving Beastie Boys. I know Adam Yauch died of cancer a couple years ago, right? And but the remaining 2 have written a book about, supposedly, I haven't read it yet, so I don't know, but about being, just these sort of Brooklyn punks who got into rap, like they originally started trying to start a punk band, and then, I guess felt that they were just a little too late. It's like the Ramones and all that had kind of happened already. MTV was taken off and whatever, and they just fell in love with, these street rappers from Brooklyn, and the rest is history. So that really sounds really interesting. I've heard some stories from the book that I haven't read yet, but including they talk a lot about Yauch and how he like would play a prank on other members of the band that basically went on for like 15 years. And it took them 15 years before he finally confessed. He was like, that's me, stuff like that. I'm like, it is so true, so the way it is. You got to do things to keep life interesting, whatnot. So yeah. So I want to read that, and then I think there's a couple more on my Amazon wish list. The Todd says they weren't too late for punk, but there was an opportunity to mix their punk sensibility with rap. Actually, I would say they fell in this gap where the perception was punk was over. And what we didn't know is that punk was about to come again, and that a new wave, and I say that with little n, little w, not the new wave, but then a new generation basically of punk was about to take off just a few years later with Green Day and, all the mid 90s stuff, but there was just this, I mean, obviously I've written about this a bunch in DGC, that there was this feeling at the end of the 80s that like a whole bunch of stuff was over. And of course it wasn't over. It was just, yes, exactly. Punk never stopped. Yes, trendy sorts get tired and distracted. And the industry had this idea that it was like, oh, well, like we had like the hippie era, that's over. And then we had, this kind of music and that's over. And then we had this and that's over. And then it turns out none of it's ever over. That you can, in fact, just keep making those kinds of music. And, in the mid 80s, in 1987, we had this sudden, like resurgence, like, oh, the Summer of Love was 20 years ago. And then there was like this resurgence of like bell bottoms and flowered print dresses and stuff. And it was just like, oh, actually, yeah, we can just bring it around again. It's like, yeah, everything from, World War II on basically can just be recycled over and over. So, and yes, Green Day is still going strong. And yeah, I mean, but I really felt like there was specifically this period of time, which is what we're writing about now in 1991, 1990 into 1991, where it's like a bunch of stuff in the industry had just ground to a halt. And it really matches up with when a bunch of stuff in American politics and culture overall had basically ground to a halt because of the whole Reagan Bush, sort of culture wars and whatnot. And then, of course, those of you who lived through it know that we're about to come into 1992 and some great things are about to happen, like Bill Clinton's election and grunge taking off, and Nirvana not being a one-hit wonder, and it, et cetera, and like an entire new genre of rock and roll being discovered. Of course, it was always there by the industry, so yeah. Yep. Yes, Warner Brothers particularly kept signing punk bands that didn't know how to market them, Husker Du, et cetera. Yeah, and that still goes on. Here's the thing. Actually, somebody was telling me the other day, is they were just like, they were sad that there's no metal anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean there's no metal anymore? There's plenty of metal. Some of it's not in English. A lot of it is not in English. But if what you like is the the fluffy hair and the heavy makeup and the glam and the heavy guitars and whatever, there's plenty of that. It's just a lot of it's in Japanese and Swedish. It's just, and the thing is, it still isn't English. It's just not as it's just not what tops the commercial charts here. But of course, the commercial charts here are now like kind of everything's out the window. Everything's narrowcasting. Everyone's buying music via algorithm on the internet, and whatnot. And so, so the strangest little niche thing can suddenly become the next big thing, because things that are big are not as big as they used to be, first of all, and there can be many more of them. So, what was it we were chatting about the other day? Pentatonics. Okay, so if you were someone who, was watching YouTube 7-8 years ago, Pentatonics was like, someone that, a group that you saw, that maybe you discovered them through, they were on that reality, the Sing Off, they were on the reality TV show. It was like American Idol, except it was a cappella singing groups. I know, and some of you were like, I never saw that. That's because a lot of people didn't watch the Sing Off, which is why there were not more seasons of it, I think. But it's like they built up their fame on YouTube, completely separate from that at the time when the industry was still kind of ignoring YouTube or not really sure how to work with it, and so forth and so on. And now it's like they're so mainstream that they do like a Christmas special every year on one of the major networks. So, and like I missed that transition, and I was like, what, Pentatonics Christmas special? Really? And it's like, oh, and they're like, this is the third one or something. I'm like, oh, okay, see, I don't watch television. So I miss when people break out from my little internet bubble into the mainstream. I don't get to always notice that happened because because I'm not in the mainstream a lot of the time. So yeah, kind of funny. But I mean, I guess it's sort of the same with books, in a lot of ways, that the people who are well known within certain genres, whatever, maybe you're still, I guess it's also a question of how do you measure it, I mean, certainly my mom's friends decided that I had made it when I had a book in Target. And they could walk into a Target in, rural wherever, or, suburban Florida, and take a picture of it and send it to me on Facebook. It's like that was I had made it. And granted, that book also did make me a fair amount of money, but it isn't always like that. Sometimes the thing that is being sold in the, whatever, doesn't actually make you any money. But in my case, it did. Thank goodness. Which is why I'm not in credit card debt now. But after 20 years of that, but you know how it is. The If any of you have read any rock musician biographies or whatever that you want to recommend to me too, by the way, please do. Just drop me comments on the DGC site or drop me email or whatever, because I'm always looking for recommendations, and I will add them to my Amazon wish list. And then people are like, I don't know what to get you for Christmas. We'll have something to get me. Knowledge is always good. um, yeah. All right. Let's see. Gosh, it's almost 9:30. All right, I'm going to read a little bit. Chris on Facebook asked me to read chapter 955. Sadly, I only got 2 pages out of it, so I'm going to have to read a bunch of it off the screen. And I should probably just bring it up that way as the better way instead of having to change halfway through. So, if you don't remember which chapter is 955, which I didn't, I had to go look it up, obviously. I don't memorize the numbers. They're assigned by an app anyway. This is a fairly recent chapter where they're in Tennessee, and it's prior to Christmas. It's the chapter entitled "In Your Eyes," and I'm going to just do one last little mic check. And audio wise, if I face this direction, can you all still hear me all right? I guess that's the question. So if my mouth is facing this way and not that direction, can you still hear me? I can also stand up to read this if necessary, if that would be louder or, whatever. That's the main question, because I have to click away from the YouTube window. Great. Thumbs up. Good. Fortunately, it's quiet here, and no cats are crawling across the microphone or anything like they sometimes do. So let me make my window a little bigger. All right. In Your Eyes, like the Peter Gabriel song, right? I don't have too many illusions about being a good son. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not one. That doesn't mean I'm not a good person. That's a whole different discussion. But when you talk son or daughter, though, you're talking about a very specific thing. And that's how you relate to your parents. It's really about what your parents think of you as you relate to them, isn't it? But of course, your 2 or more, I don't judge, parents may not agree on either what makes a good son or whether you meet the criteria. And I wish I knew why it mattered to me. Claire fell asleep in the car on the way back from the mall. When your body's fighting something, it's better to be asleep than awake, right? She was disoriented when we got back to the house, and Remo had to sort of steer her down the driveway and up to the door with one arm around her shoulders and one hand on her arm. I think he would have carried her if he could, and I think she would have liked that. I'm not really sure she knew where or when she was. Back at our hotel, after we'd brushed our teeth, while Ziggy massaged his nightly cream into his face with tiny circles of his fingers, I sat on the toilet lid and said, "Do you really think Remo's being ridiculous?" Ziggy didn't bat a literal eyelash. "I think you think Remo's being ridiculous. What makes you think I thought that?" "Your whole thing of this would be like if I went to take care of Roger when he was dying. That thing." "Well, maybe it's not a direct analogy. For one thing, you and Roger were never in love." He glanced my way as if looking for confirmation. "God, no, not even close. I'm not sure we ever even liked each other." "Yet you're in a band together?" "Yeah, well," I shrugged. "It's funny. Bart used to harangue me about how we should take out a classified ad looking for a new singer, and I was like, no." "Why were you against it?" I even said something like, "You wouldn't want to meet your future wife through a newspaper ad, would you? Someone you're going to spend a lot of time with and be intimate with." And he was like, "Well, just going with the people we know isn't working." But what I couldn't figure out how to say then was that things not working out with Roger was how I knew I had to find someone I was compatible with, and I didn't think the classified ads were the way to do that. He paused in his face treatment to look at me, and then I jumped out of the crowd in the park one day. Mm-hmm. I leaned my elbow on the edge of the counter around the sink and put my face against my fist. Jonathan called it love at first sight. And what did you call it? Love is a pretty big word. I saw him stiffen, to armor himself. I don't think I would have even noticed something like that before. Was it that Ziggy tried harder to hide it before, or that I knew him so much better now? Then I finished my sentence. So I guess maybe it's a big enough word to encompass all of the everything I feel for you. He broke out in a smile. You're writing corny song lyrics even when you aren't trying. That made me smile. Yeah, well. Gonna write it down? No, I'm gonna sit here and stare at you while you stare at yourself. We may as well both enjoy it. He laughed and jokingly bopped me on the nose with a swipe of face cream and then went back to grooming himself as contentedly as a cat. I went back to feeling the mid-level melancholy that I'd been feeling since we said goodnight to Remo. You would have thought that Ziggy, being the goth in the family, would have been the one to mope around thinking about death. But then again, it wasn't his mother who was dying. It made me think about things like what a life was worth or what a life meant. Was Claire thinking about those same things, or was she avoiding thinking about those things? It was hard to tell if all her talk about dying was really her facing her mortality, or if it was just the biggest and most convenient reason ever to be the center of everyone's attention. Attention whore is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. Ziggy often used it for himself, but Ziggy had a way of making slurs and insults sound like some kind of tribute when they were applied to him. I didn't find myself comfortable applying the term to Claire, but the people who originally made that term up to be a slur were probably thinking about people exactly like her. Mostly women, but something clicked. You like the attention. Yes, he said with a lilt. He moved on to doing something with his eyebrows with the sides of his thumbs. From you mean? Or in general? Both, but I guess I'm talking about in general. Oh, the whole feminine aspect thing. I was feeling my way through the thought, trying to find the words that made sense. There's a kind of thing of being in the spotlight, of attracting the spotlight, and I guess it's a social human thing in general. If Jonathan were here, he would have had a handful of $5 words to explain the concept, but he wasn't, and I made do with the loose change in my brain. Maybe it's society or social training, right? But when a woman walks into the room, all the heads turn because if she has applied all the feminine aspects to herself, they're all attention getting. Pretty hair, bright colors, frilly dress, whatever. It's all about being made to be looked at. And so the people look back. He sensed I was getting deep into something. He made agreeing noises and took me by the hand and pulled me over to the bed while I kept talking. So I guess that's what I think maybe I understand now. If you really want to grab attention, everyone's been trained to look at the feminine. Am I right? You may be onto something a little, he allowed as he draped himself across the bed. It may be chicken and egg, but he trailed off and lay his head on the pillow. I mean, do I cloak myself in a somewhat feminine aspect because it's attention getting? Or is the attention just a happy byproduct of the fact I'm like this? He licked his lips. Attention whore. Or is it that whatever one does that is attention getting is automatically labeled feminine? Like supposed to want attention. Ziggy could say the word want in the middle of any sentence, and if he dragged it out just that tiny extra beat, he could send my antenna up. Okay, not my antenna. This is just queer, he said. One way to go against what society wants. One way to run counter to the conformity. He stretched, and the faded t-shirt he'd put on to sleep in rode up and exposed his abs and ribs above the waistband of his pajama pants. Conformity is a buzzkill, I said, but my brain was already disengaging from speech mode and shifting into sex mode, so the words were kind of on autopilot. Come here. It was such an easy relationship dynamic. He said come, and I did. So so I'll tell you one thing about what's funny about Daron and Ziggy getting along right now is that uh, page views go down on Daron's Guitar Chronicles whenever the two of them are getting along. And when the two of them are not getting along, page views go back up again. I am not a whore for page views, or I wouldn't be closing this arc at the end of this year. I would be, milking it for all it's worth, right? I would be coming up with another reason to break them up and send them on another tour on different continents or whatever, right? But no, this has a plot. This has an arc. It has things that are going on together, and at the moment they're getting along fine. There's still some strife to come. Obviously, there's a lot of emotional baggage piling up between Claire's terminal illness, and then all the stuff, the lawsuit stuff, and et cetera. That's all waiting for them, right? That's all going to be coming to a head. But like I said, the whole point behind this being a final year is that, well, we've got a lot of loose ends to tie up. But it does seem to be the case that when people are like, oh my God, are they going to start getting along again? Are they going to kiss and make up? People read more diligently, and when things are going okay with them, people read less. It's fine. I'm not saying you guys should be reading more. No, it's fine. I think people now save it up and binge it when they're less like, oh my God, I must find out what happened right now. But the time when page views were the absolute highest, in all my website analytics, and whatever it was, after Daron came back from Spain, and there was the whole they hadn't seen each other in how long, and so forth and so on, and then there was the whole they were both going to be in New York, and we're that whole thing with the preview of the movie and all that, and it was like every post had more and more and more people, and of course because we're posting on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you can see the spike on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the graphs of access, right? And it was like the tallest spike ever is that chapter where they reunite, and and then of course the reunion lasts for several chapters because there's a fight, then they go to the park to talk, and then et cetera. And it's like I think those were, I can't remember the numbers because I don't remember numbers, but 10 times as many people picking up those chapters in the first few hours after they were posted than would normally pick it up in a day, and so yeah. So this dynamic is well defined, and that's been going on for years. So so I know it, but no, I'm not going to create conflict between them just because it's going to drive page views. That would be how a TV show works, or the way TV shows used to work, when they just wanted to bring you back week after week. Did I ever tell you about how I broke up with the X-Files? The time when I guess in the 90s, when I decided that television was not a medium that I wanted to really consume on a regular basis anymore. Actually, it was when we used to get together like with friends to watch the X-Files every week. It was back when you watched actual television in real time. And the kind of TiVo wasn't really a thing yet. Or it was maybe just starting to be. I'm trying to remember when TiVo exactly came, but yeah, TiVo was maybe a couple years later. And the whole thing with the X-Files is like every week they're like, the truth is out there, and I finally was like, the truth is not out there. In fact, at any moment, this whole thing could just, an actor could decide to leave, or the it could not be renewed, or whatever, and they're never going to wrap up all the hints and loose ends, and what happened to Mulder's sister and all that. They've got a hook that keeps you coming back every week. They have to just keep serving that to you. That's the purpose of it, right? And I decided that I didn't like that. That I wanted there to be a specific plan for the story to have a beginning, middle, and an end. And Darren's Guitar Chronicles, although it's extremely long, is meant to have some specific arcs come to an end. And so that's what's coming in the next however many months it's going to take. 6 to 12. I'm guessing it's going to be like 11, but I've been wrong before. So we'll see. All right. Some other notes. Somebody wanted to know what's going on with the Darren's Guitar Chronicles new paperbacks. So Ever After is my new, supposed publishing distribution company. They're a publishing company who partner with indie authors to put the books into bookstores and whatnot. It took me a long time to redo all the files, so we redesigned the covers, and then I fixed up the interiors a little bit, and then of course I had to change the front matter, and and it just took a long time for me to get around to doing it all. And I believe all the files are there now. They haven't told me what the release date is. Like I said, books 9 and 10 have never been in paperback before, but they're still backlist. So they'll be made available at the same time as books 1 through 8 in the new designs. And then book 11 and book 12 will be released as new books. Book 11, I believe I got the proofreading back already, but I haven't done the typesetting and, so forth. Then of course, book 12 is the book we're in the middle of right now. Looking at the word count of book 12, it may be that we're going to need a book 13. But it seems likely, but I haven't talked to them about that yet. So shh. Don't tell anyone. I need to switch back to my YouTube window so that I can see. Yeah. Yes. Soap operas. Yes. X-Files mythology arc did suffer from a surfer's mysterioso. Yes. True. Very true. And that's not just, is the thing. That's not to say that watching the X-Files was not enjoyable. It was, but I decided that I wanted to spend that time doing something else. No judgment on people for whom that was the best hour of their week. Art, storytelling, etc. It's made to pump your emotions. That's what it's for. And if it's not doing that, then do something else. Music is, ultimately exists to pump our emotions, to stimulate our senses in our brains. And it just, that's why it's there. So, but if it's, you don't enjoy it, don't, pick something else. There's only 24 hours in the day, and you should be sending some of them sleeping. She said to herself. Yeah. So that's what's the next big thing for DGC is me getting all these paperbacks out. Can we admit to hoping for a bad end to Digger? Chris says. People can live for a really long time with a bad liver sometimes. So, I can't make any promises. Yeah, I don't know. No spoilers. Can't tell you anything. You have to read the book. All right. Let's see. And so the other thing is, I don't think I'm ever going to stop completely, writing Darren's story, or writing about Daron and Ziggy. I think the two of them are going to be around for a long time in some form or another. Some of you know, if you read my heterosexual romances, that Ford, Remo's son, who is, is an infant currently in Darren's Guitar Chronicles, is an adult character in the Secrets of a Rockstar series, and that if they had let me carry that series on, we would have eventually gotten his story. So I think I probably am going to do his story at some point. And the question is whether it's going to be written from his point of view, or if we're going to get Daron and Ziggy's perspective on him. I don't know. And Ziggy is sort of like, hey, Daron's had the microphone for 9 years. I kind of would like to say some things. So there will be more eventually. But I have to let it simmer for a while before I'm sure sort of how it's going to come out, and will it be in the serial form or not? I mean, so like Ziggy's diary was in the serial form, but it was a very different form from the sort of Daron confessional, form. We'll see. Ziggy is still very changeable, and changes his mind often about what he wants, and we'll see. Um, Daron does not change his mind often about what he wants, and so maybe that's part of what keeps the two of them on track. I don't know. All right. Do you want me to read the sex scene now? I should probably do that. The one that I picked out, and I gotta find my PDF again. So if you don't know how this works, the sex scenes are not in the main body of Daron's Guitar Chronicles. What's on live on the web supposedly is PG-13. Some people might say it's R just because of the sex and drugs and rock and roll, but I in my view it's PG-13, and if it were a heterosexual story, I think it would be judged PG-13 easily. But then there are people who always believe that anything that is gay is automatically, less for kids, or whatever, less safe for work. Then I of course think that's bullshit. But so I consider it PG-13. But there are sex scenes, and then readers who are reading along, when we come to a spot where a sex scene could appear, what I usually do is I say, okay, everyone who puts $1 into the tip jar this week gets it, whatever. Or the way it really works is anyone who gives a donation at any point gets a little thing saying, hey, do you want to start receiving the bonus scenes? And I usually ask for basically, minimum of $1 per scene. We're up to 13 scenes in what do you call it? It's in 9 years, 13 scenes. There's not that many, honestly. And since I'm known as an erotica writer by most people, it's kind of funny that there are not more sex scenes. But I kind of save them for the right moments. And what's kind of funny is that I was not intending to write them at all originally, but when the serial was young and new and whatnot, there were a couple of very vocal, readers, some of whom were also serial writers, and basically some of them said, in fact, I'll come right out and say it. MCA Hogarth, who is a one of my favorite serial writers, she writes mostly science fiction and furry and whatnot. Came right out and she said, "Where's the sex scene? I have money." like I will throw money into your tip jar if you'll do this. And I was like, all right, fine, let's see how this goes. And of course, everybody threw money into the tip jar, and that was back when the readership was very small. So I was like, okay, people like it. Not that I needed to be convinced that people like erotica. I mean, but this story was kind of more of a YA. I mean, he's 19 when the story starts, and it was more of a YA kind of thing in my mind. And that didn't last, obviously. So, but that's why it's like this. Is it not only is it a fundraising thing where it's like people have to give money in order to get it. It keeps the site clean. So if we were ever on a place where I had to worry about the hosting or something, it'd be like, this is clean-ish. There is no explicit sex except sort of where necessary by the story. But it's not erotica. Just because someone has a blowjob in an alley doesn't necessarily mean that it's erotica. Not by my standards anyway. So here's a sex scene. This is the one that comes after. It's in the apartment in Boston where Daron and Ziggy are playing house while Daron goes through therapy and this, that, and the other, and whatever. This is before they go to Tennessee and whatnot. And they have basically just had a fight, but they kind of work their way through a fight for once instead of just like, I don't know, instead of one of them leaving, whatever, all the bad things can happen when you have a fight, right? In this case, they kind of almost make up on the spot, and so the And the next thing you know, they're like, hey, like they're all hot and bothered. So this is that sex scene. It comes after the scene, make out all right. It's in fact, I'll back up just a little bit. It's like right after Daron has realized that while they were in South America, Nirvana has broken huge and that they have missed it, and he's just like, in all the things that the music industry were telling him for 2 years that were not never going to happen and that are over, all of a sudden, of course, are the biggest thing ever. And then Ziggy goes through a whole like crisis of confidence and basically being like, is glam over because now everybody's just going to have messy hair and you know um, flannel shirts, like they all look like you, Daron, and Darren's like, I dress like this because these are just my clothes, like this is not like a fashion statement, or whatever. So they have this little argument where, Ziggy's basically like, I just need you to support me in my feeling like my career may be over. And Daron is basically like, trying to strategize, like how, and he's like, just shut up and listen to me because I feel like you're not helping. What you're doing is you're just telling me everything I say, you're wrong. Of course, these are the two points of view of the two characters, right? And Daron eventually is like, okay, you're right. Okay, the I still think I'm right, but you're right. I was being a dick. So let's talk about it some other time, or whatever. And then they next thing you know, they end up in bed. So here's the sex scene that goes with that. So this is how it is when you know each other well. I think instead of settling into an unchanging, stagnant state, now I can shift moods just as quickly as he does. Or maybe the step from fighting to sex is always a shorter distance than I think it should be. How do you want it? I ask, as heat rises between us like I'm holding a pot of steaming water in my hands instead of his hips. Maybe ask isn't the right word, it's more of a demand. The Neanderthal in me starts coming out sometimes when our clothes start coming off. You mean, how do I want you? He pulls me backward into the bedroom. Or how do you want me to do you? I say, but the more blood rushes through my system, the less nuance I seem to be able to handle in words. If you've got a preference right now. You mean now that we're making up after a fight? Ziggy strips his shirt off and lets it fall to the rug. Or now that we're living together for a while? He undoes his belt and slips it out of the belt loops. Or now that we're committed? There's an emphasis on that last word. You can use the M word, I say, stripping my own shirt. Naked words like these require naked skin. Married? He chirps. Monogamous, I say, and I see him swallow. Oh, fuck, he breathes. I love it when you talk dirty. He's undoing my fly now. His fingers dig eagerly into my briefs and wrap around my erection. So you're saying this cock here, I'm the only one who gets to touch it? Well, besides me. That makes him laugh, but it doesn't lessen the intensity of his gaze. Tell me when you want to touch it, and I'll touch it for you, he says. I'll suck it for you. He licks his lips because it's the only cock I'm going to suck. Is it? I feel dizzy. Relationship talks are supposed to be had when we're calm, cool, and collected. While we're having sex is probably the wrong time to be making these promises to each other. But maybe it's the only time to do it when my demanding side comes to the fore. Are you promising me that, Ziggy? I am. Oh, fuck, indeed. Monogamy has always been an abstract concept in my mind. Hearing it detailed this way makes it suddenly, earthily, concrete. Call me crazy, but the thought of those very specific lips wrapped exclusively around my very specific penis is way hotter than any ecstasy-fueled orgy. And the thought occurs to me, he doesn't mean it. He's just saying it to turn me on, which would make sense since we're having sex, except I want it to be true. Are you really promising, or are you just saying that to wind me? I can't finish the sentence because he drops to his knees, taking my pants down with him, and performs the act that I've been imagining. Plus that thing he does with his tongue, God, I throw my head back as my hips buck and I feel the tips of my hair brushing my bare back. Every sense is heightened. He climbs my body like a ladder and kisses my mouth with the sweat of my own balls on his lips. It's the only cock I want, the only one I need. Okay, but how about getting yours sucked? I'm trying to ease his pants down now, but it's awkward. I end up yanking them down to mid-thigh somewhat roughly. He's as hard as a spring. I hear a couple of the backup dancers have developed a taste for it. His cheeks redden. I wasn't sure Ziggy could be made to blush. I wondered if you'd hear about that. You mean you were relying on me hearing about it, because I should have heard about it from you. He swallows. Shit, you're right. With everything else going on, it didn't make the top of the list, which is no excuse, I know. I run my calloused fingertips ever so lightly under the ridge, tantalizing him. Tell me what you did with them. Not much, I swear. I really restrained myself. Did you? I did. The orgies were fun, but relatively easy to limit. Plenty of partners to go around. Details, Ziggy. I'm getting to that. Yes, I got sucked off a couple of times, but that was about it. I mean, I used my hands a lot, but I didn't let anyone do anything to me other than suck me. It didn't feel appropriate. What's funny is that I agree with him. There's something so very Ziggy about the thought of him at the center of a pile of bisexual body motion experts. I have to be sure we're on the same wavelength, though. Fuck anyone? No, absolutely not. I knew you wouldn't want me to, and I didn't want to either. I mean, really. Sounds like Ziggy's having as much trouble keeping his sentences in order as me. I haven't stopped teasing him. It's not like I don't know it means something. Mm-hmm. If getting my dick sucked is a problem, I'll tell the dancers to stop. As if they're in the next room waiting their turn. I suppose they are in a way, theoretically. No, I say, if you want to rule your little harem with your scepter, if they want to worship it like that, fine, I'll allow it, but only that. His eyes widen with glee. You're seriously saying I can have orgies and get sucked off to my heart's content? Yes, because you wouldn't be you if you didn't. I step onto his pants and force him backward toward the bed until he steps free of them. And it's you I'm in love with, not the person I wish that you were. He pulls me into an ecstatic kiss. Ziggy is always passionate, but I'm not sure I ever felt so much happiness in a kiss before. Maybe that time in St. Louis, that would be the only time that came close. By the time we make it onto the bed, all I'm wearing is socks. I'm serious about that. Jonathan tried to change me, and I hated it. It's not you I want to change, Zig, just our relationship. I don't want to change you either. He leans back against the minimalist cast steel head of the bed, stretching out his sinewy arms. Tell me what you want for yourself, then, I say, crawling up the length of him until my lips are almost touching his and my cock throbs against his hip. I shouldn't make all the rules. His voice is earnest, not seductive at all. I want you to be as monogamous as you need to be to not rip yourself to shreds, Daron. You know the only thing making me hesitate the slightest bit is I'm worried about hurting Colin. Rejection hurts, even when there's a good reason. Then you know what I want? I've told you this before, but I don't think it sank in. I want you to be fuck buddies with Colin. But only him. Everyone else is off limits. When you're on tour and you're so horny you can't see straight, you have two choices, Colin or call me, and I'll talk you through the most ball-ringing jerk-off session of your life. Okay, maybe his voice got a little seductive there at the end. Now I'm practically panting. We'll have to make sure Colin's all right with that. I'm pretty sure Colin thinks that's already how it is, Ziggy says. But if you insist, let's have him over. I know what you're thinking. What? You're thinking we'll have a talk about it and be horny and have a threesome. You know me so well. Well, are you thinking the same thing? I reserve judgment until I see how that conversation goes, and right now I want to be thinking about you and not him. I just want to fuck now. Neanderthal brain is thinking, there you go, he's yours, claim him now. I decide to take it slow just to torture myself. You know what I'm going to do to you tonight? No, what? Everything. Everything that's my right. He wriggles happily under me. I realize everything is a really long list, but I love not having to hurry. No worrying about who might knock or walk in. I decide to mark him as mine another way, and I set to making a bite mark hickey next to one nipple, pausing to suck the nipple every time my tongue gets tired. I suck some other parts of him too. There's nothing wrong with my mouth, after all, other than the perpetual tendency to look up and not speak at moments when I should. Maybe I've been left prone to that lately, though. Every part of him turns me on. The curve of his eyebrow, the curve of his neck, the sound of his sigh, the warmth of his skin, the mist of his sweat, the point of his toe, the taste of his tongue. When it comes to the fucking, I still feel like the most crucial moment between us is the penetration. Orgasm is great, but nothing drives home, no pun intended, the reality of sex like that particular thing. Maybe I'm too focused on it, but maybe that's just how I'm wired. I like all of sex, but my mind focuses on that moment of interlock as a goal, a purpose unto itself. Once that goal is reached, the rest is gravy. Ziggy tells me things from the Tantra book his hairdresser gave him sometimes, like what it would take for a man to be as multi-orgasmic as a woman. Someday we'll work on that. Not tonight, though. Tonight I take him from behind so I can bury my nose in his hair and lose myself in friction and sensory overload. And then I turn him over and work him from the side because my hand gets tired easily and I'm conscious of keeping it out of the way. That position's good for making it last, not so good for finishing. I'm not so concerned about finishing. Ziggy's like a sponge. He'll soak up every drop you'll give him. He'll take and take and take. And while that might not have been the healthiest thing for an unsuspecting young closet case trying to form a relationship 5 years ago, right now it means he'll take everything I can dish out. I'm good with that. There we are. And look, it's 10:02. Technically, I'm 2 minutes overtime. So I want to say thank you all for coming. I know I promised earlier that I would post a list of the inventory of what T-shirts and everything I have left over from previous Kickstarters and whatnot. I've got the candlelight shirts. I've got regular the 1989 Moondog 3 shirts. I've got the handprint shirts. I've got them in men's and women's and different sizes and whatever. I'll make it. I didn't get a chance to do it today, but I will make an inventory and post a list so anyone who wants to try to get one, they will be shipped off in time for Christmas, basically. Christmas and Hanukkah. And any other gift giving opportunities that you might have coming up, including treating yourself. So thanks for joining me in my YouTube live, and I'll be around, for another year at least, right? So thank you. I'm gonna put a banner on the site. Daron's Guitar Chronicles final year, and see if people get excited about that or what, or if people just convince me, no, it can't. You stop. You have to keep going. So. Thank you so much. I'm going to sign off now.